when hikers found 8 sleeping bags hanging in trees in a circle. A note in the center told the story. Bear in camp, left by 2 families, 8 people total, who vanished 6 years ago. But the bags were perfectly spaced, facing inward like a circle. Someone took time to arrange them carefully, and GPS coordinates in the note weren't for the campsite. They pointed somewhere else. The morning of July 14, 2018, started with excitement. 2 families, the Morrisons and the Chens, packed their vehicles in suburban Denver, preparing for a week-long camping trip in the Rawa Wilderness. David Morrison and Robert Chen worked together, had been friends for a decade, and shared a passion for outdoor adventures. This trip had been planned for months, a chance for their families to disconnect from screens and schedules, to experience wilderness the way it was meant to be experienced. Remote, challenging, real. David Morrison was 42, an experienced backpacker who'd been camping since childhood. His wife Jennifer, a pediatrician, was less experienced but enthusiastic. Their son Ethan, 14, was an Eagle Scout who'd been lobbying for a serious wilderness trip for years. Their daughter Sophie, 11, was the practical one, the planner who'd made checklists for everyone's gear. Robert Chen was 45, David's colleague at an engineering firm. He'd grown up in California, learned to camp in the Sierras, and jumped at David's invitation for this trip. His wife Lisa taught high school English and loved the idea of a week without grading papers. Their son Michael, 16, was the oldest of the kids, naturally taking on a leadership role. Their daughter Emma, 13, was the tech-savvy one who'd reluctantly agreed to leave her phone behind. They met at David's house at 6 in the morning, transferred gear into David's SUV and Robert's truck, and drove north. The plan was ambitious. They'd hike 12 miles into the Rawa Wilderness, set up a base camp near Blue Lake, spend 5 days exploring the area, then hike back out. The trailhead ranger had approved their permit after confirming everyone was prepared for backcountry conditions. Bare canisters for food, proper gear, emergency supplies. Everything looked good. They reached the trailhead by 11. The parking area was empty except for one other vehicle. The trail was rated difficult, which kept casual hikers away. Perfect for what they wanted: solitude, challenge, adventure. The hike in took 7 hours, 12 miles with full packs, elevation gain of over 2,000 feet. The kids handled it better than expected. Michael and Ethan competed over who could carry more weight. Emma and Sophie bonded over shared complaints about their brothers. The adults paced themselves, took breaks, enjoyed the scenery. They reached Blue Lake at 6 in the evening. The lake was pristine, surrounded by pine forest and granite peaks. No other campers visible. They had the place to themselves. David and Robert scouted the area, found a perfect campsite on the north shore. Flat ground, close to water but above the high water line, protected by trees from wind. They set up camp efficiently. 4 tents arranged in a rough square. The Morrisons' 2 tents on one side, the Chens' 2 tents on the other. The adults shared cooking duties while the kids gathered firewood. By 8, they had dinner ready. Freeze-dried meals rehydrated over camp stoves, not gourmet but satisfying after a long hike. That night, they sat around the fire talking, laughing, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. David pointed out constellations. Lisa told stories about her students' ridiculous excuses for missing homework. The kids roasted marshmallows and planned the next day's adventures. Everyone went to bed tired and happy. Day 2 started with a day hike to a nearby peak. They left camp at 8, reached the summit by noon, ate lunch with panoramic views. Michael took photos with a small waterproof camera David had brought. Emma wished she could post them online, but admitted the digital detox was kind of nice. They returned to camp by 4, spent the evening fishing. Robert caught 3 trout. They cooked them over the fire for dinner, everyone agreeing fresh fish beat freeze-dried meals. Day 3 was similar. Another hike, this time following the lakeshore to explore surrounding meadows. Sophie found wildflowers and pressed them in a notebook. Ethan identified bird species. The adults discussed work and life and how nice it was to not think about work and life. That night, clouds moved in. The temperature dropped. David checked the weather radio. Storm forecast for tomorrow, but nothing severe. Summer storms in the mountains, normal. They'd stay in camp if it got bad. Day 4 brought rain. Not heavy, just steady drizzle that made hiking unpleasant. They stayed in camp, played card games in the tents, read books, took turns cooking. The rain continued into the evening. Everyone went to bed early, the sound of raindrops on tent fabric oddly soothing. That's when things changed. Around 2 in the morning, Jennifer woke to a sound outside her tent. Something large moving through the campsite. She nudged David, whispered that something was out there. David listened, heard it too. Heavy footsteps, snuffling sounds. He knew immediately what it was. Bear. He'd prepared for this scenario, had lectured everyone on bear safety before the trip. They'd stored all food in bear canisters, placed them 100 yards from camp. But bears had good noses. Maybe it smelled something they'd missed. David grabbed his headlamp and bear spray, unzipped the tent slowly, quietly, peered out. In the beam of his headlamp, he saw it. A massive black bear, maybe 300 pounds, investigating their cooking area. It was knocking over the camp stoves, nosing through gear. David's first instinct was to scare it away, make noise, look big, assert dominance. But something stopped him. The bear was big, really big, and it was between him and where they'd stored the food canisters. If he spooked it and it charged, he'd have nowhere to go. He woke Jennifer, told her to stay quiet and still. Then he carefully moved to Robert's tent, woke him the same way. Robert peered out, saw the bear, understood the situation immediately. They decided to wait it out, let the bear investigate, find nothing, and leave. Standard protocol. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary. But the bear didn't leave. It spent 20 minutes tearing through their campsite, shredding stuff sacks, knocking over backpacks. The noise woke the kids. Sophie started crying softly. Jennifer held her, whispered that it would be okay, that Dad knew what to do. Then the bear approached their tent. It sniffed the fabric, pushed against it with its nose. The tent wall bowed inward. Sophie screamed. The bear, startled, backed away, but didn't leave. It circled the tent, curious or aggressive, impossible to tell. David made a decision. They couldn't stay in the tents. If the bear decided to investigate more aggressively, the thin nylon wouldn't protect them. They needed to get away, regroup, figure out their next move. He whispered the plan through tent walls. Everyone gets out slowly, quietly. No sudden movements. They'd back away from camp, head toward the lake shore, put distance between themselves and the bear. Once safe, they'd decide next steps. It worked at first. Everyone emerged from their tents. The bear was 30 feet away, distracted by a backpack it had pulled open. They moved as a group, adults in front, kids in the middle, backing toward the lake. Slow, quiet, controlled. But then Lily, startled by something in the dark, stumbled, made a noise. The bear's head snapped up. It saw them moving. And bears, especially surprised bears, sometimes charge. It didn't charge exactly, but it moved toward them. Fast. Aggressive posture. David raised his bear spray, ready to use it if the bear got within 20 feet. But Robert had a different idea. He shouted, waved his arms, tried to make himself look big. The bear stopped, confused. Robert took a step forward, shouted again. The bear huffed, swung its head, but didn't advance. It seemed to reconsider. Then slowly it turned and ambled away into the forest. They waited 10 minutes, making sure it was really gone. Then they assessed. The campsite was destroyed. Gear scattered, tents damaged, food canisters okay, but everything else compromised. And the bear knew they were here now. It might come back. Probably would come back. David and Robert conferred. They had 2 options. Pack up, hike out in the dark, get away from this site. Or secure the area, make noise, hope the bear moved on to a different territory. Hiking 12 miles in the dark with spooked kids and destroyed gear wasn't appealing, but staying where a bear had claimed territory was dangerous. David made the call. They'd relocate, not all the way back to the trailhead, but a few miles away. Far enough that the bear wouldn't follow, close enough that they could make it before dawn. They gathered what they could salvage. The tents were torn but usable. Most of the sleeping bags were fine. They'd leave the destroyed gear, come back for it later maybe. Right now, they needed to move. They hiked for 2 hours in the dark, headlamps lighting the trail. It was nerve-wracking, every sound making them jump, every shadow looking like a bear. But they made it to a clearing about 3 miles from Blue Lake. Far enough. They'd camp here for the rest of the night, reassess in the morning. That's when they discovered the problem. One of the bear canisters was missing, the one with most of their food. The bear must have taken it, or they'd left it behind in the chaos. Either way, they were down to maybe 2 days of food for 8 people. David suggested they hike out in the morning, cut the trip short, play it safe. But Robert disagreed. They'd come all this way, the bear was miles behind them, they could ration what food they had and hunt or fish to supplement. The kids wanted to continue. It would be a story, an adventure. Wasn't that the point? Jennifer and Lisa were unsure but outvoted. They decided to continue. Stay 2 more days, then hike out. It would work. It had to. They tried to sleep, but no one could. Adrenaline and fear kept them awake. At dawn, they assessed their new situation. The campsite was less ideal than Blue Lake, rockier, less sheltered, but safe from the bear. That's what mattered. Day 5, they tried to salvage the trip. Went fishing, caught nothing. Rationed their remaining food carefully. Everyone was on edge, jumping at sounds, watching the tree line. The fun energy of the first few days was gone, replaced by tension and hunger. That night, another problem emerged. Michael developed a fever. Lisa checked him, found a tick embedded in his scalp. She removed it carefully, but Michael's temperature climbed. Possible infection, possible tick-borne illness. He needed rest and fluids and probably antibiotics they didn't have. Jennifer, the doctor, examined him, confirmed Lisa's concerns. Michael wasn't in immediate danger, but he shouldn't be exerting himself. Hiking 12 miles out would be difficult in his condition. They discussed options. Someone could hike out, get help, bring back a rescue team, but splitting the group seemed dangerous. They'd stay together, monitor Michael, hope he improved overnight. If not, they'd hike out slowly tomorrow, all of them. But overnight, things got worse. Michael's fever spiked. He was delirious, sweating, shivering. Jennifer did what she could, but without medication, she could only manage symptoms. By dawn of day 6, Michael couldn't stand without help. The decision was made. David and Robert would hike out together, get to the trailhead, call for emergency rescue. The rest would stay with Michael, keep him stable until help arrived. It wasn't ideal, but it was necessary. Before David and Robert left, they did something smart. They took GPS coordinates of their exact location, used David's handheld GPS unit to mark the spot, wrote down the coordinates on a piece of paper, gave copies to both families. If anything happened, If they got separated or lost, these coordinates would lead rescuers to this exact location. David and Robert left at 7 in the morning. They planned to move fast, reach the trailhead by early afternoon. From there, it was a 30-minute drive to cell service. They'd call for help, a helicopter probably, get Michael evacuated. Everyone would be fine. The 6 people left behind waited. Jennifer monitored Michael constantly. The kids tried to stay positive, but fear was creeping in. They were running out of food, Michael was getting sicker, and David and Robert had been gone for hours with no way to communicate. By mid-afternoon, Jennifer made a troubling discovery. Michael's tick bite was infected. Red, swollen, hot to the touch. He likely had Lyme disease or a related infection. He needed intravenous antibiotics soon. The situation had become critical. Then, around 4 in the afternoon, they heard something. In the distance, coming from the direction David and Robert had gone. Shouting. Not words, just voices. Distressed voices. Lisa called out, asking if it was David and Robert. No response. Just more shouting, getting closer. Then crashing sounds, branches breaking, something running through the forest. The bear. It burst into their camp, full speed, not stopping. Behind it, moments later, David and Robert appeared, running, terrified. They'd encountered the bear on the trail. It had charged them. They'd used bear spray but missed, and now it was between them and camp, and everyone was in danger. The bear was panicked, aggressive, confused by the spray residue in its eyes and nose. It swung its head, huffed, looked around at the humans surrounding it. 8 people, all terrified, all backing away slowly. David remembered the protocols. Make yourself big, make noise, back away slowly. He tried to corral everyone, keep them together. But Ethan, scared and not thinking clearly, ran, just bolted toward the trees. The bear's instinct triggered. It chased. Robert screamed Ethan's name. Ethan kept running. The bear was faster. It caught him within seconds, swiped with its paw, sent Ethan sprawling, then stood over him, huffing, deciding what to do next. David didn't think. He charged the bear, screaming, spraying the bear spray directly at its face. This time he hit it. The bear recoiled, shook its head, backed away from Ethan. David grabbed his son, pulled him away. Ethan was bleeding from claw marks on his back but alive. The bear retreated about 30 feet but didn't leave. It circled the camp, staying at a distance but not abandoning the area. They were trapped. 8 people, 1 injured, 1 sick, and a bear that wasn't going away. Jennifer examined Ethan. 3 deep lacerations across his back. Not life-threatening if treated soon, but he was losing blood. She had a first aid kit, did what she could, but he needed stitches and antibiotics. Now they had 2 medical emergencies. Michael with a raging infection, Ethan with serious wounds, and a bear preventing them from moving. Hours passed. The bear stayed nearby, visible in the tree line, watching them. As evening approached, David made a decision. They couldn't wait for rescue anymore. Michael and Ethan needed hospital care now. They'd have to walk out tonight, all of them, somehow. But first, they needed to protect their gear. If they left everything, they'd have no supplies for the hike. But carrying everything with 2 injured people was impossible. They needed a plan. Sophie had an idea. The bear wanted food. Everything it had done was food-motivated. If they could get their scent off their sleeping bags, hang them in trees away from camp, maybe the bear would investigate those instead of following them. David thought it was brilliant. They gathered all 8 sleeping bags, hung them in trees in a rough circle about 50 yards from their actual camp, made it look intentional, like maybe it would confuse the bear, make it think the humans were still there. Then David did something else. He took the paper with the GPS coordinates, added a note, "Bear in camp." Simple explanation for why they'd left gear behind. He included the coordinates not of this campsite, but of a location about 2 miles south, where he remembered seeing a ranger emergency cache. If rescuers found this note, they'd go there first, might find supplies to help with the rescue. He placed the note in the center of the circle of hanging sleeping bags, weighted it with a rock. It was the best they could do. At 8 in the evening, as darkness fell, they started hiking. Michael between David and Robert, arms over their shoulders. Ethan walking with Jennifer's support. The kids carrying what light gear they could manage. Moving slowly, painfully, toward the trailhead 12 miles away. They never made it. What happened in those dark hours, no one will ever know for certain, but investigators would later piece together fragments. Around midnight, they reached a river crossing. The water was high from recent rain, moving fast, normally manageable but not with injured people and in darkness. They attempted to cross. Something went wrong. Maybe someone slipped. Maybe the current was stronger than expected. Maybe exhaustion made them careless. Michael, already weak from fever, went into the water. David went in after him, then Robert, then the others, trying to help, trying to save each other. The river was cold, fast, unforgiving. It swept them downstream into rapids, into rocks, into chaos. By dawn, the river had carried them miles from where they'd tried to cross. Separated, injured, scattered along the banks or caught in debris. Some might have survived the river, but hypothermia, injuries, and exposure in the following days finished what the water started. David and Robert never reached the trailhead, never called for help. The families were reported missing when their vehicles stayed at the trailhead past their planned return date. The search began 5 days after they vanished. The ranger who took the missing persons report on July 21st was immediately concerned. 2 vehicles left at the trailhead, permits showing they were due back July 20th. That was already 24 hours overdue. Experienced groups didn't miss their return dates without reason. Something had gone wrong. The first search team deployed within 2 hours. 8 rangers with 2 search dogs started at the trailhead, following the route marked on the Morrison-Chen permit. Blue Lake, 12 miles in. The trail was well defined, recently maintained. The searchers made good time, calling names constantly, watching for any signs of passage. They reached Blue Lake by evening, found the original campsite immediately. The destruction was obvious. Torn tents, scattered gear, deep claw marks on trees. A bear had been through here, recently, based on the condition of the damage. But no people, no bodies, no blood beyond what might be expected from minor injuries. The lead ranger, Tom Pacheco, had seen bear attacks before. This looked aggressive, but not fatal. The families had likely fled, which was smart. But where had they gone? The search dogs circled the area, picking up multiple human scents, but unable to follow a clear trail. Too much contamination from the bear, from the passage of time, from the rain that had fallen 2 days prior. The search expanded. More teams arrived. By day 2, 30 people were combing the wilderness. They found the secondary campsite 3 miles south of Blue Lake, more evidence of occupation. Torn sleeping bag fragments, empty water bottles, a first aid kit scattered on the ground, but again, no people. What puzzled investigators was the lack of a clear trail. Experienced hikers leave traces, footprints, broken branches, disturbed ground. But beyond the 2 campsites, there was nothing, as if 8 people had simply evaporated. Tom brought in tracking specialists. They found faint signs of passage leading southeast from the second camp, heading away from the main trail deeper into the backcountry. That didn't make sense. If they were trying to get out, why go further in? Unless they were lost or running from something. The families at home were frantic. David's parents flew in from Michigan. Jennifer's sister came from Texas. Robert's elderly mother arrived from California, barely able to walk but refusing to stay away. Lisa's brother organized volunteer search parties. The waiting room at the ranger station became a makeshift command center for desperate relatives. They brought photos. David and Jennifer's wedding picture, Robert teaching Michael to ride a bike, Lisa and Emma baking cookies, Sophie's school portrait showing her gap-toothed smile, Ethan in his scout uniform. The Rangers pinned the photos to a board, made sure every searcher saw them. These weren't just names on a permit, these were real people, real families. By day 5, the search had grown to over 100 people. Volunteers from Denver drove up on weekends. Local hiking clubs organized grid searches. A helicopter with thermal imaging flew patterns over the most likely areas. Nothing. No heat signatures, no signs of life, no evidence beyond those 2 campsites. The media arrived on day 6. News vans parked at the trailhead. Reporters interviewed rangers, filmed search teams heading into the wilderness. The story had everything. 2 families, including 4 children, vanished without a trace. Possible bear attack. Wilderness mystery. It was national news within days. The families did interviews. David's mother, Patricia, sat in front of cameras and begged her son to signal somehow if he could hear the helicopters. Jennifer's sister described Jennifer as cautious and smart, said she wouldn't take unnecessary risks. Robert's mother couldn't speak through her tears. Lisa's brother became the spokesperson, coordinating media requests, trying to keep the focus on the search rather than speculation. But speculation was inevitable. Online forums filled with theories. Some said the bear had killed them and dragged the body somewhere searchers hadn't looked. Others suggested they'd fled the bear, gotten lost, died of exposure in remote areas. Darker theories emerged. Had someone else been in those woods? Had this been foul play disguised as a wilderness accident? The Rangers dismissed the foul play theories. The evidence clearly showed a bear encounter. The destruction at the campsites was consistent with bear behavior, and there was no indication of another human presence. This was a wilderness accident, not a crime. By week 2, the official search scaled back. The superintendent explained to the families that they'd covered every reasonable area, that survival odds after 2 weeks were minimal, that they'd transitioned to periodic sweeps, checking likely areas, but couldn't maintain this intensity indefinitely. The families refused to accept it. Patricia Morrison, 73 years old with arthritis, hiked into the wilderness herself. Rangers tried to stop her, said she'd become another rescue case, but she went anyway. Walked the trails calling her son's name until exhaustion forced her to stop. Other family members did the same. They couldn't just sit and wait. Private search efforts continued for months. Jennifer's sister hired a wilderness tracking expert, a man who'd found lost hikers after weeks in the wild. He searched for 10 days, found nothing new, just the same 2 campsites, the same puzzling lack of trail. The first winter came. Snow covered the mountains. Searching became impossible. The families had to accept that if their loved ones were out there, they wouldn't survive a Colorado winter. The search paused until spring. Spring brought renewed effort. As soon as the snow melted, volunteer groups returned. They checked areas that had been inaccessible in winter: ravines, river valleys, remote canyons. They found hiking gear, but none that matched descriptions of what the families had carried. They found remains, but they were animal remains, not human. The case went cold, not officially closed, but inactive. The photos stayed on the ranger station board for a year, then were taken down to make room for new missing persons cases. The families' names went into databases, National Park Service missing persons lists. NamUs, FBI records. 8 people who walked into the wilderness and never came out. David's parents moved to Colorado. Couldn't bear to be far from where their son vanished. They bought a small house near the trailhead, spent their days hiking the wilderness, looking. Patricia developed a routine. Every Saturday she'd hike to Blue Lake, sit at the original campsite, talk to David as if he could hear her, tell him about her week, about how his brother was doing, about how much she missed him. Other hikers found her there sometimes, this elderly woman having one-sided conversations with the forest. Some thought it was sad, others understood. Jennifer's sister started a foundation, the Morrison Chen Wilderness Safety Foundation. It funded search and rescue operations, provided emergency beacons to families hiking with children, educated people about bear safety. In 3 years, the foundation helped locate 2 missing hikers. 2 families got their loved ones back. It didn't ease the pain of Jennifer's sister's loss, but it gave her purpose. Robert's mother didn't last long. The grief and stress broke her. She died 18 months after Robert vanished, never knowing what happened to her son and grandchildren. At her funeral, people said it was mercy, that not knowing had killed her as surely as any disease. Lisa's brother became obsessed. He spent every vacation, every long weekend, every spare moment searching. He learned wilderness survival, studied search and rescue techniques, became an expert on the Rawa Wilderness. He mapped areas the official searches had missed, hiked trails that barely existed. His marriage fell apart, his career suffered, but he couldn't stop. Lisa had been his little sister. He'd promised their parents he'd protect her, and he'd failed. Year 2 brought a possible break. A hiker found a backpack in a ravine about 8 miles from Blue Lake. It was weathered, torn, but intact. Inside, they found items that might have belonged to the families: a water bottle with Morrison written in marker, a child's jacket that could have been Sophie's size. The discovery reinvigorated the search. Teams converged on that ravine, searched every inch, found nothing else. The backpack's origin remained uncertain. It could have been the family's, could have been someone else's. Year 3 brought false hope. A hunter reported seeing people in the wilderness, far off trail. Descriptions were vague, but matched the age ranges. Search teams investigated, found nothing. The hunter later admitted he might have been mistaken, might have seen other hikers and wanted to help so badly that he'd convinced himself it was the missing families. Year 4 brought a psychic. She claimed to have visions of the families, said they were near water, near fallen trees. She led a search party to a dozen locations that matched her descriptions. All were empty. The families thanked her anyway. False hope was better than no hope. Year 5 brought resignation. Most of the families had accepted that their loved ones were dead, accepted that they might never find bodies, might never have funerals, might never have closure. They held memorial services without remains, buried empty caskets, tried to move on with life, even as part of them remained frozen in July 2018, waiting for news that would never come. Patricia Morrison died in Year 5. Hiked to Blue Lake one Saturday like always, sat at the campsite, talked to her son. A hiker found her there that evening, slumped against a tree, peaceful, heart attack, the coroner said. Patricia's last words, according to her journal found in her pocket, were written to David. "I'll see you soon," she'd written. "I never stopped looking." The ranger station still received occasional tips. Someone found gear that might be related. Someone saw something suspicious years ago and just now thought to report it. Every tip was investigated. Every tip led nowhere. The family stopped doing media interviews, stopped posting on social media. The public's attention had long since moved to other tragedies, other mysteries. The Morrison and Chen families became a footnote, a cold case, 8 names on a very long list. But those who knew them didn't forget. David's co-workers kept his office door nameplate as a memorial. Jennifer's hospital dedicated a conference room in her honor. Robert's engineering firm established a scholarship in his name. Lisa's school planted a tree. Michael's friends wore bracelets with his initials. Emma's book club kept her favorite chair empty. Ethan's scout troop retired his number. Sophie's classmates wrote letters to her every year on her birthday, even though she'd never read them. The wilderness kept it secret. Search and rescue trained in that area, using the Morrison-Chen case as an example of how experienced people could vanish completely. Rangers warned hikers about the dangers of bear encounters, about the importance of emergency beacons, about how quickly situations could deteriorate. And every summer, on July 14th, a small group gathered at the trailhead. Family members, friends, rangers who'd searched, volunteers who'd never given up hope. They'd hike part way in, hold a brief ceremony, remember 8 people who'd wanted adventure and found tragedy. Lisa's brother never stopped searching. Even in year 6, even when everyone else had moved on, he was out there, checking new areas, following hunches, refusing to quit. His wife had left him. His job was barely holding on, but he couldn't stop. Because somewhere in those mountains, his sister and her family were still waiting to be found. He was right. They were waiting, but it would take hikers stumbling onto 8 sleeping bags hanging in a perfect circle to finally bring them home, until 6 years later. In July 2024, a group of backpackers exploring off-trail found something strange. 8 sleeping bags, faded but intact, hanging from trees in a perfect circle. The arrangement was too deliberate to be accidental. They investigated, found a note weighted with rocks in the center, bear in camp, and GPS coordinates. The hikers called rangers immediately, described what they'd found. The rangers recognized the names on the gear tags, the Morrison and Chen families, missing since 2018. The coordinates in the note led rescue teams to an emergency cache 2 miles south. They searched that area intensively, found nothing, but the hanging sleeping bags gave them a new starting point. They expanded the search from that location, following logical routes the families might have taken. 3 weeks later, they found the river crossing, found remnants of gear caught in trees along the bank, found evidence of a struggle, of something terrible that had happened in the water. Over the following months, remains were recovered from various points along the river. DNA testing confirmed identities. All 8 members of both families. All had died within days of each other. Drowning, hypothermia, trauma from the river. The investigation concluded they'd attempted a night evacuation due to medical emergencies and a bear threat. Had tried to cross a dangerous river in the dark. Had been overcome by circumstances beyond their control. The bear was never found. Probably long dead by 2024, just an animal doing what animals do. The families had been unlucky. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong series of decisions that compounded into tragedy. The hanging sleeping bags became a haunting symbol. 8 bags for 8 people, arranged in a circle like they'd protected each other in life. The note with GPS coordinates showed clear thinking in crisis, an attempt to leave evidence for rescuers. But the coordinates pointing to the cache instead of their actual location may have sent the initial search in the wrong direction, costing precious time. The families were buried with full services. Their story became a case study in wilderness safety. How quickly conditions can deteriorate. How one problem leads to another. How even experienced campers can find themselves overwhelmed. The sleeping bags were eventually taken down, stored as evidence, then returned to surviving family members. Nobody wanted them. They ended up donated to a search and rescue training facility where they're used used to teach about leaving markers and signals. The circle of hanging bags is gone now, but in that forest, at that spot, there's still something, a presence, a memory, a reminder that 8 people fought to survive and almost made it, that David and Robert tried to get help, that children trusted adults who did everything they could, that 2 families who went into the wilderness for adventure found something far darker. The mountains don't mourn, don't remember. The forest has reclaimed that campsite, but we remember. 8 names, 8 sleeping bags, 1 note that told the story, Bear in Camp, and GPS coordinates that pointed somewhere else, somewhere they hoped would lead to rescue. It didn't, but they tried. And that's what haunts everyone who knows this story. They tried so hard, came so close, and still the wilderness won.